I've got a couple funny stories. And then the next morning, I had a bowel movement that was all-star. And let me tell you, a good bowel movement is underrated. People don't know what to expect. I mean, when I went to the chiropractor for the first time, I was scared to death. I thought he was going to break me in two. If a patient come in and show me the Y strap, where you put it around, you grab it, and it's like you're on a water ski, and you can pull back and pull the whole head off, and not off, but can you do this? Can you do this? It seems like that would feel good. Like, no. It's never good having somebody wheeled out of your chiropractic office on a stretcher from the paramedics, but with 20 people watching and 2 paramedics and 2 fire trucks. And I recall the paramedic coming in, and I said, listen, this guy's got a hot back. He looks at me and goes, is he paralyzed? I'm like, shut up. The guy's got a acute back. Just come get this guy out of here. Illinois, chiropractors are licensed under the Illinois Medical Practice Act as physicians, like MDs and DOs. So we're under the same umbrella, of course, with 2 stipulations that 1, we don't prescribe medicine, and 2, we don't cut anybody open. There's no surgery as part of that scope of practice.
Chiropractic care. Some people swear by it. Others are more skeptical. So what's the truth? Hey everyone, welcome back. I am Greg Czubernat, a personal injury attorney and your host. My guest today, Dr. Robert Zoboski, is a licensed chiropractic physician of 35 years. We're diving into what chiropractic care actually does and what most people get wrong about it. Let's get started. Are chiropractors real doctors? And if you could explain to us what's the difference between a chiropractor and a MD?
First of all, how you define what a doctor really is. Like, what is your definition of a doctor? I think most people think that their family physician would be considered their doctor, their go-to person who will, coordinate their care and make necessary referrals and, keep them out of the grave, so to speak, if any 5-alarm fires come up clinically that need to deal with. The word doctor and physician has been a source of contention over the years for not just chiropractors, but for other professionals as well. Now we see doctors in physical therapy, doctors of psychology, and there's been some banter back and forth about who should be called a doctor and who shouldn't. Webster's dictionary, if you look over the years, will have different versions of what the definition of a doctor is. In the United States, the licensing of chiropractors is at the state level, and some states have a wider scope of practice, what chiropractors can and can't do clinically, and some have a very narrow scope of practice where you can't do, you're very limited on what you can do with your patients. Illinois, chiropractors are licensed under the Illinois Medical Practice Act as physicians, like MDs and DOs. So we're under the same umbrella, of course, with 2 stipulations that 1, we don't prescribe medicine, and 2, we don't cut anybody open. There's no surgery as part of that scope of practice. But by law in the state of Illinois, we are licensed under the Illinois Medical Practice Act as physicians. As for the differences of what a doctor really does, that depends on, I guess, what the patient's definition really is, what they're looking for, what type of care. There's reactive care and there's proactive care. And I think most of the patients that come to see me initially, it's a reactive process. They have this acute episode of back pain or neck pain, or they were in a motor vehicle crash or some sort of sports injury. And they're looking for a fast way to get out of their pain and get back to normal daily home and work activities. Historically, they would, when I grew up and I injured my spine playing ice hockey, my parents were very traditional. When I went to my mom and said, "Oh, Mom, my back's killing me," she didn't think chiropractor right out of the gate. She was right to the family physician who is trusted. And that's just the way it was back then. And it took me many years to actually get to the chiropractic table for treatment, which then, of course, changed the trajectory of my career in a very positive way.
A lot of people either love chiropractors or don't trust them at all. Why do you think there's such a divide?
I think one of the reasons why there would be a divide is that they really don't know what goes on inside of a chiropractic office. I wouldn't say that for just the general public, but I will say that for probably most other physicians and doctors. Maybe the trust isn't there because they really don't know what's going on. And to be frank, there is a divide in the profession. The profession is split between a group of chiropractors that believe the spinal subluxation is the only thing that they're trained to diagnose and treat, and they focus solely on that versus other doctors that want advanced training or advanced practice, and they utilize laboratory work, diagnostic tests. They work on differential diagnosis and more standard medical approach to neuroorthopedic conditions. And I would say also that there's a fear element. People don't know what to expect. I mean, when I went to the chiropractor for the first time, I was scared to death. But I did that only sort of like a last-ditch effort because I had seen 3 other doctors for my back pain that I had, and I got 3 different diagnostic considerations to think of, and none of the treatments really helped because I had in my opinion, a mechanical problem of my spine. And if you have a mechanical problem in your spine, you cannot treat that pharmacologically. And when I first went to the chiropractor, he was about 300 pounds, 6'4", and I was about 100.5 soaking wet. And before my first treatment, I was fearful. No, I was fearing for my life. I didn't know what to expect.
What was your biggest concern with your first chiropractic treatment?
I thought he was going to break me in two, to be quite frank, because, it had to do with manipulation, my spine. But what was most interesting and what calmed my fears is that I knew that he knew what was going on with my spine mechanically, because he did something that none of the other doctors did. He actually palpated my spine. He went down my spine segment by segment, and I knew where the area was, but I didn't open my mouth and tell him where it was. I wanted to know if he could find it, because I certainly knew where it was. So I kept my mouth shut, and he went down my spine segment by segment, started at the upper thoracic spine, and he made it down to the thoracolumbar junction where the thoracic spine meets my lumbar spine. That's a region that's a very common problematic region for a lot of people, myself included, which brought me to the office of the chiropractor. I knew, and now I'm excited because he knew exactly where it was. He could pinpoint the area of problem and pain and spasm. So now the next question was, well, now what? What do we do? Now it's time for spinal manipulation. That was the part where, I showed up the next day for my first treatment, and I was, thinking about rescheduling and maybe I could, but I realized that I'm in for this because I want some help. And I knew that he knew where the problematic area was. I remember getting off the table. I didn't know if it was April or Tuesday. Wow, this guy just rocked my world. But I will say that right then and there was this sort of like my body took this sort of deep breath of fresh air, like, oh, what a relief. And within 2-3 treatments, my chronic mid-back pain that I'd suffered forever is now resolved. But interestingly enough, it wasn't just the pain that resolved. I also had a quite distinct physiological response to that treatment as well, related to gastrointestinal function. I had some, I know it's not going to sound great for your viewers, but when you're a college student, you don't really have the healthiest lifestyle whenever. So I was somewhat a little bit constipated here and there, depending on what I was doing. But all of a sudden now, after that first treatment, I remember going back to the fraternity that I was staying at as an undergrad in Toronto. And I ate a full meal. And usually after eating half a meal, I'd get, just feel bloated. And, it wasn't very uncomfortable. But this time, after I had this treatment, I went back, I had a full plate of food, and I felt satiated, and I felt comfortable, and I didn't feel bloated at all. I'm like, wow, that's cool. So I had another full plate of food, and I felt full, but not uncomfortable. And then the next morning, I had a bowel movement that was all-star. And let me tell you, a good bowel movement is underrated. So that took me to the what the hell happened phase. My pain's gone, but what happened to my GI function? Well, neurologically speaking, you do have parasympathetic nerves in the thoracic spine that feed your GI system for peristalsis. So I was intrigued right away. Now, there's more to this than just getting my back cracked. Okay, what's really going on here, and what else is going on? So that was my initial response to care. And right then and there, I decided, hey, I'm going to be a chiropractor because this is extremely powerful therapeutic intervention. At least it was for me. So if I can be in a healthcare model that can do this to one person a day for the rest of my life, that's a pretty fulfilling career. You're going to have a lot of happy people. So that's where I started my journey. And I think people in general public the people that love chiropractic, those are those people like me. I love it. The others that are skeptical or are wary about it probably don't know the full extent of it, or have had a not so positive experience with the one way or the other, personality-wise, or they just didn't get a good response to care, or they're potentially trying to be sold a package of something, and that's where maybe the I don't want to call it the hucksterism comes in, but maybe that level of professionalism isn't seen by some versus others.
At the beginning of our discussion, you brought up two different groups of chiropractors: the purists, who focus exclusively, what I understand, on spine manipulation, and you also mentioned the more modern chiropractors. How can a potential patient tell the difference? What questions should this potential patient be asking of his chiropractor?
That is an excellent question, and I would answer it like this. First of all, like any other doctor that you go see or specialist, you talk to your friends and family, and you seek out who gets, high marks for being a good clinician, being a good doctor. To me, it's about you can have parity in evaluation and management through doing the basics of the consultation and evaluation and making the assessment, and not being cavalier, not trying to sell plans. Bottom line is this for your listeners: if you have a mechanical problem of the spine that's amenable to manual methods like spinal manipulation, you're going to get better quick, really quick. 1 to 3 treatments, in my experience, on a mechanical problem of the spine or pelvis or back, and you're 75, 80% better. Disc problems, it's a little bit different. But again, the approach that I've taken over management of disc herniations and disc problems, radicular symptoms, is control the inflammation and then determine whether or not this is a mass effect where you have a disc that's bulging, hitting a nerve, and you're getting this leg pain, versus an inflammatory radiculopathy, which is you sprain the back, you have this huge inflammatory result which irritates the nerves and you get leg pain. So you have to eke out the difference between a mass effect of a disc sitting on a nerve or in a nerve-related area versus inflammatory irritation of a nerve root, which will give you and present with similar symptoms. But then again, radicular symptoms of sciatica or radiculopathy can also have layover symptoms like having hip problems or hip osteoarthritis or bursitis. They can present also very similarly to a sciatic type presentation. So it's the clinical evaluation, the consultation, the family history, the social history, the personal history, the history of the present illness, the basics of what you're taught to be able to look at the patient and fully evaluate them from front to back. That's key. And in some offices where the spinal subluxation is the only thing, the key element you're looking for, in my professional opinion, you're going to miss things. And if you miss things, you might be able to miss those things year after year after year, but someday it's going to bite you in the ass, pardon my language, but it's going to come back and bite you. So my modus operandi was always to be a good clinician. Just be a good clinician. Take care of people. Do the proper workup. Be able to write a proper report so that if you get a referral, your referring doctor knows that you know what you're doing, and don't take advantage of what you could potentially do with the patient for financial gain. Take care of the patient. If they're 80, 90% better after 2 or 3 treatments, give them their home care plan and exercises and discharge and get on with it. That to me, and then of course, write that discharge summary back to the referring physician, because more likely than not, you're going to get another patient referred. So it's all about being professional. But I think that the family physicians, the internal medicine doctors, may have a little trepidation in making the referral because they don't know what goes on in that office. They hear all of this, and there's no professional standard as it relates to what chiropractors do. One might be different than the other, apples and oranges. So if somebody wants to see the chiropractor, of course, talk to your friends and family, but do your own research. dig deep, look at their good Google business profile, right? Look at what other people have to say.
How can a patient know that they're getting the quality care?
Again, I believe that friends and family and making a referral, asking questions and digging down into the potential doctor that you want to see, that's where you're going to get your answers. And bottom line is the consultation and the evaluation. You'll be able to know right away in that first visit the competence and the compassion or empathy that the doctor has, and what recommendations are made and how long it's going to take, how much it's going to cost. Those are all the questions my patients have are this. Number one is, do you know what's going on with me? And then the second thing, of course, is, well, can you help? And then they're going to ask, how long is it going to take and how much it's going to cost? Everybody has those questions, and rightfully so. But I think one of the soft factors that nobody really considers is that I think patients are looking for doctors that care. Do they really care about them? Nowadays, if you're seeing one of the doctors that are in a large medical group, you don't have 15 minutes or 20 minutes to sit down and ask all your questions. You may have 5 or 6 minutes in and out. And it's what I would consider kind of like a turnstile medicine. Whereas I think people are really looking for doctors that really care about them. And that's where chiropractic versus allopathic medicine is different, is that chiropractic is hands-on. I mean, there's no hands-off. It's hands-on and palpation, and you have to have a connection with the patient. That they need to know that you're there to help them. They need to know that you know what you're doing and what you're going to do and how long it's going to take. And you're going to know within a treatment or two whether or not you made the right decision.
How do you address the question from potential patient who asks, Dr. Zoboski, do you take my insurance?
Historically, people check their insurance plans before they make the call. Some call from certain companies that I don't accept their insurance because the reimbursement is woefully inadequate and almost insulting. So we just don't agree to participate in those plans. What I do say is that we have a certain fee schedule that we stick to, regardless of what insurance company you have. And that applies across the board because you can't have a sliding fee schedule. That's against the law. Your schedule has to be set. But that doesn't apply to the insurance companies. They have multiple fee schedules and multiple plans and multiple this. And it's unfortunate, but it takes a lot of administrative chops to go shred through all of that to finally tell the patient, this is what your benefits are. And a lot of people say, well, listen, it says I have chiropractic benefits. It says I only have a $20 copayment, but they fail to mention that that's their secondary insurance, and their primary insurance is Medicare, which has very limited coverage for what it is that we do. We've been trying to change that as a profession for many years, and it seems to be a political hill that we just can't get over currently, but continue to work on it. We tell them that this is our fee schedule. This is how it is. This is what, if you're with Medicare, this is what you have to, this is what your financial responsibility will be. If it's with United Healthcare or Blue Cross Blue Shield or any other major medical provider that we participate with, it all has to be eked out based on their plan. And unfortunately, that takes a lot of time on phones and emails and administrative time that could be better used to actually treat the patient.
Which cases or which patients do you like working with the most?
Young patients with acute onset mechanical problems. They respond well, real quick, and they're very happy people. Yeah, I would say sprains, strains, sports injuries, athletes, they're very much in tune with their own physiology, and they know what's right, they know what's wrong. And when you correct the insufficiencies, they get better extremely fast, and they're very grateful.
What are the actual limits of chiropractic care? For example, when should a patient go and see a medical doctor instead?
Well, that depends on the case, right? That would be, to answer that would be case by case. There are times where patients will come in and they think that their back pain is related to, a muscle, a nerve, a ligament, or joint, and when in actuality, it might be due to their heart. If they're having myocardial infarction, or they're having headaches that are persistent and their blood pressure is averaging 180 over 110, it's accelerating hypertension. Those are times where the referral needs to be made and made expeditiously. And that's another sort of disconnect with those chiropractors that don't have those medical relationships that they can lean on when they need to, or pick up the phone and make that call and say, listen, I have this. It happened to me once. I had a patient that returned from Paris, and she had back pain and leg pain. And while I was evaluating, and this is of course on a Saturday afternoon, last patient, ready to go home, enjoy the weekend, they call and got to see you. I just returned from Paris. Well, on a long flight, back pain, some leg pain. And, on the workup, the blood pressure was a little elevated and a little bit shortness of breath. So and pain and tightness in the calf musculature. And they were thinking it's from a previous lower back disc issue that they had, when in essence they had a deep vein thrombosis and a pulmonary embolism, which is an emergency. And if you don't have that connection with their family doctor or other primary care providers, you're on your own to get that patient to the hospital now, and deal with the fallout later. But if you have those professional relationships, it's a phone call away, and you can coordinate care rapidly, and that's the way I think it should be done.
Why do some medical doctors distrust chiropractors, and where does the tension come from?
I think there's a multi-part answer to that question, and I think probably the most common reason would be that they really just don't know what to expect if they refer one of their patients to the chiropractor. Unless they know them and have past professional experience with them, I think they'd be somewhat hesitant to, refer their patients for chiropractic care if they really don't know what's going on. And I think that comes back to the purist versus the mixer type of chiropractor, where you may go and have to see this chiropractor for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 times, like the 3 times a week for a month, and twice a week for a month, and once a week for a month, and then once a month forever. Whereas on the chiropractors that are in advanced practice and want more advanced training and want to integrate better with the medical physicians and the DOs, is that they stick to the standards of care, the basics of doing a good clinical history, good clinical examination, be able to come up with differential considerations for the patient, and be able to communicate that effectively to the referring doctor, like an initial report or a discharge summary. The way that medicine works now, if you can operate in that system, more likely than not, you gain more trust and potential referrals from primary care and other doctors. But I think, and above and beyond all of that, is patient outcomes. Chiropractic care does very well with back pain, but we don't want to focus just primarily on back pain, but we have excellent outcomes for lower back pain. And I think most physicians, most doctors, most people know that's what, if you say chiropractor, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Back pain, right? So it's the level of communication, and you can, as a chiropractor, parlay your expertise by being able to communicate effectively with other physicians. If you can do that, I think and develop that reputation with other allopathic physicians, then you'll do fine, and you work together ultimately for what? The patient. And that's what this is really all about, patient care. Another reason why there might be some distrust is that there might be some lingering effects from a lawsuit which occurred over, I believe, 14 or 16 years. The very famous Polish chiropractor Chester Wilk here in Chicago and 4 other chiropractors successfully sued the American Medical Association, American College of Physicians, American College of Radiology, and other medical groups for violation of the Sherman Act, antitrust, trying to contain and eliminate a competing profession. And that lawsuit took about 16 years, and ultimately it went in favor of the chiropractors. If anybody really wants to know the story behind this, it could really make a movie. There was a Chicago Tribune medical writer named Howard Valinsky. He wrote a book called Contain and Eliminate, and it is a fascinating explanation of the journey of this legal battle, Chester Wilk versus the AMA. And back in those days, in the late 60s and into the 70s, they didn't have email. Everything was memos and on paper. And an interesting twist in this lawsuit is that the chiropractic profession didn't really have support enough from the own profession to move forward with this lawsuit. Why? Because they didn't think there was anything we could do because of the all-powerful American Medical Association. And of course, the profession of chiropractic was split. So you couldn't really get a consensus of, hey, yes, we should move forward in this fashion. Interesting enough, the Church of Scientology gets into this story. L. Ron Hubbard for the Church of Scientology thought back in the day that his methods would be beneficial for people that had psychiatric disorders, and that this would be beneficial. And he thought that the American Medical Association would, fully embrace his methodologies to treat this. And in essence, they cut that line of communication and completely downgraded anything to do with the Church of Scientology. And of course, that angered L. Ron Hubbard, and he actually had trained moles that were part of the Church of Scientology to infiltrate the headquarters of the American Medical Association in Washington, D.C., and right here in Chicago. And at night, while everybody was gone, these moles would start rifling through the file cabinets of the American Medical Association looking for
evidence, I would assume.
Evidence against the Church of Scientology. Well, they didn't find any evidence against the Church of Scientology, but what they did find was all of the documentation and memos on the, quote, Committee on Quackery, close quote. And the number one target on that committee was chiropractic, contain and eliminate. So interestingly, they, kind of like a Watergate-ish investigation, they released that information to Chester Wilk et al. And the group that was suing the AMA. And that proved to be sort of damning information, that a violation of the Sherman Act for trying to contain and eliminate. However, I will, on the partially defending the American Medical Association, H. Doyle Taylor was the attorney for the American Medical Association during that trial. And his depositions, I think there's about 8 hours of it, is available on YouTube. And I watched all of it. In actuality, some of the things that he was saying were accurate. There were some things that chiropractors were purporting that they were treating where they had really no business treating it. Maybe that was also part of this is why you shouldn't refer anybody to a chiropractor. But that was years ago. Things have changed now. The educational has changed, but the profession is still split.
How is your relationship with medical doctors today, and how has it changed over the years?
It's fine. I as long as you treat the patient correctly. I think bottom line, all doctors want to be doctors because they want to help their patients. And to this day, I truly believe that. So to get the referral from another doctor means that you need to know what you're doing, and you need to provide an excellent service. You need to communicate your findings accordingly. And then bottom line, you need to deliver. The outcomes have to be good. And if you can see the patient, do a proper consultation, a thorough evaluation, drop your initial letter, treat the patient accordingly, and discharge them when they reach maximum medical improvement, which, if you have a mechanical problem of the spine, is going to be quick, then I believe you gain trust. And then once trust is there, that's a good pathway for continued professional relationships. However, and then there are some that might be continuing to stick to the after effects of the work of the Wilk versus the AMA lawsuit. That, see, back then they distributed, the American Medical Association distributed pamphlets to all across physicians in North America about, these 3-panel brochures about beware of these quacks, and chiropractic was number one. So now you have these pamphlets in all primary care doctors' offices, not only for the doctors, but for the patients of the primary care doctors. So that, that can have lingering effects. And maybe that's part of the reason why some of the other physicians are hesitant to work with chiropractors. In case I've only had in my career run-ins with 2 primary care doctors that we had to come to a swift resolution of our disagreements. One in particular, I had a patient that came in. He had pure radiculopathy in the arm. He had disc herniation in his neck, and he had lightning bolt pain in the arm, and he couldn't sleep. He had black rings under his eyes. It was terrible pain. And for anyone out there, that your listeners that have had a cervical radiculopathy, they know what I'm talking about. So there's not much to do there on a manual medicine side when you're in that much pain. A steroid pack and an MRI. Anyways, it's about dump the inflammation, take care of the patient. They're in a lot of pain. So this one particular patient has his primary care doctor, who I wrote a referral to his primary care doctor with the correct diagnosis and my recommendations of a steroid pack and an MRI. Well, my patient, who went back to his family doctor with my initial report, my patient told me that he took the report, looked at it once, and then threw it on the ground in his office in front of the patient. And I found this out a week and a half later when the patient came back to see me to follow up. He was doing much better. He got the steroid pack, he got the MRI, the diagnosis was right, treatment was correct. But he told me what had transpired with his primary care doctor. So I implemented the 24-hour rule. 24-hour rule is when you're angry, stop, back up, collect your thoughts, give it some time, and then address it in the morning. So I took the 24 hours off, and the next day I took the liberty to contact this physician, and I was very polite, professional, said, I'd just like to talk to the doctor about this patient, and he's with patients, he'll get back to you, when he's done. Fantastic. So about 3 hours later, he calls back, and the first line out of my mouth is, what's your problem? And then he went off on me about chiropractors, this and this and that. I see him in my office with this and that. I said, not from my office, you don't.
So he had a problem with chiropractors as a group, not your particular referral.
And I told him and let him know in no uncertain terms that, hey, I have spent a lot of time in this profession. I'm board certified in clinical orthopedics, a master's in advanced practice, an undergraduate degree in chemistry, and 2 publications and blah, blah, blah. I tell him basically, I know what the hell I'm talking about. And another case, the only other case I've had where there's been a problem with the referral process is patients sometimes go from PPOs to HMOs to back and forth, and their health insurance plans change. So they may need a referral from their doctor if they're an HMO. And I had treated this patient previously, and she had a reoccurrence of, it's a common low back condition. I said, okay, well, I can treat you, but you need a referral from your primary doctor because you have an HMO. Okay. So she went to her primary doctor, and her primary doctor told her, oh, no, I can't make that referral. And she asked why, and he said, well, I don't want to go to jail. Which I was incredulous. I thought, what do you mean go to jail? I guess it was illegal, for him to refer to chiropractic. So that was not too long ago, maybe a decade ago. But other than that, those are the only 2 run-ins that I had. I think if you can communicate professionally, your reputation precedes you in the community. But if you're also not doing a good job, that reputation will, get out in the community as well. So developing professional relationships as a chiropractor in the medical profession takes time. You have to prove yourself. You have to do a good job, and you have to let the patients speak for your care.
Is chiropractic care pseudoscience or misunderstood science?
I think there's plenty of science behind the diagnosis and treatment of lower back pain. There's plenty of science behind that, years and years of it actually. And there's a good portion of science behind management of neck pain. But when I graduated, remember that medicine is the diagnosis and treatment of disease. That's what medicine is. Chiropractic, in my opinion, is not that. It is the promotion of health and fitness. Our caduceus, our chiropractic caduceus, our coat of arms, doesn't say low back pain specialist. It says health. So there are many ways besides management. Pain management is health, and that's it needs more work and more research on the promotion of health and fitness, particularly nowadays with RFK Jr., Make America Healthy Again. There's a focus now on quality food, regular exercise, stress management, and so on and so forth. But nowadays, with the advent of artificial intelligence and the large language models, and now you can leverage that technology to make healthcare plans more personalized. And that's where my excitement comes. I remember years ago when I first started practice, there was an obstetrician who worked across the hall of the chiropractic clinic that I was associating at. And I decided one day I'm going to walk in and see him, and I'm going to tell him that chiropractic is the greatest thing in the world, and he needs to refer me all of his patients. And he was gracious enough to give me 15 minutes of his time. And when I walked into his office thinking I was going to tell him everything about chiropractic, I didn't do any talking. He did all the talking, and I listened. And the 2 points that he made that stick with me to this day are, look, you guys need to do more research. Okay. You need to do more research behind what it is that you do. And his second piece of advice was, well, don't do anything stupid. You'll be okay. So I think it's pretty sage advice. But he was right about the research. And I've always been curious. I mean, when the first treatment that I had, not only did it resolve my pain, but it also had a direct effect on my gastrointestinal function, which I thought was extremely interesting. Not a placebo. It was real. So I wanted to study that even further. As a matter of fact, in my first year of professional school, I went back to the University of Toronto. I talked to one of my professors about this. I said, I had this amazing physiological response to care. Do you think there's anything there? And he told me, well, without doubt, you should look into it. And then once I found out it would take me about 8 years to get my first, solid set of data to publish, I was somewhat disenchanted because when you're in school and you get out, your student loans, you got to make some money pay off. So maybe down the road we could investigate this. But 35 years later now, I'm actually starting a 1-year cohort of precision medicine with 9 patients. And we're going to follow this over 1 calendar year. And we're using polygenic risk assessments, evaluation of the human gut microbiome, of course, blood and urine indices, and a toxicology test. And then we're going to use this data to personalize an approach to the patient to promote health and fitness, to massage their DNA to promote health and fitness. There's a lot of functional integrative approaches out there, and everybody has the answer for, and that's another thing that's driven me over the last 14 years to investigate this further, is that everybody has the answer, like the keto diet. There's carnivore diet, Atkins, Ornish, vegan, vegetarian, pesco, Mediterranean, the list goes on. And it's not a new argument. It's been argued for years. But with the advent of technology nowadays, in the large language medical models, I foresee medicine becoming very precise and very personalized over time. And I'm going to be studying that for a year with a small cohort of patients, not to target a disease to treat, but to actually see if we can modulate the gut microbiome by utilizing polygenic risk assessment to change biomarkers of chronic inflammation or chronic disease. And we'll test it 3, 6, 9, and 12 months. And there's all kinds of support systems. And we're going to be leveraging AI models to try to not predict, but to look at all of the clinical data and try to make some inferences as to, hey, you may want to think about this direction for promoting health and fitness for this patient, or this direction, or you may consider this supplement. And that's another thing, supplements, vitamins and minerals, and all of these vendors that sell all kinds of nutraceuticals that they have the answer. Well, not a lot of that has been studied either. So that's also part of the study, is to, when you're taking vitamins and minerals and phytonutrients, what's the dosing strategy and why? And when do you start and when do you stop and how do you reevaluate? All that stuff is really not out there and needs to be investigated. And that's where my curiosity has taken me. I know what I can do with musculoskeletal pain, disc problems, back problems, acceleration, deceleration injuries, rotator cuff tears, and so on. I know what I can do, and probably more importantly, I know what I can't do with those conditions. But if I have the opportunity to not only help the patient with pain management, but also give them some solid advice for their future 5, 10, 20 years out based on their polygenic risk assessment, their laboratory indices, maybe we can have a plan that not only helps them with pain, but actually helps them promote health and fitness. And that's really what I believe my definition of chiropractic is in the future.
What is the most shocking or terrifying case that you have ever treated?
I don't say I have any shocking or terrifying, but I have some notable cases that stay close with me in light of what had transpired. Example, I learned one very important lesson about screening your phone calls. And one day my office manager tells me, listen, you get a call. There's this gentleman, his buddy hurt his back. Can he bring him in? Okay, of course he can bring him in. Let's take care of him. But I failed to ask whether the patient was ambulatory. He wasn't walking. So I remember this is on a Friday afternoon, beautiful sunny day in the spring. And I look out the door and my office manager goes, you got to see this. You got to see this. What? And I look out into the parking lot, and this gentleman, this big dude, had to be about his big man. He's got this buddy hanging over his shoulders and he's carrying him like a fireman. The guy can't walk. He can't stand. Oh no. What am I going to do? Well, I can't just tell him, get lost, So come on in. And we get him on the table, and this poor gentleman is screaming in pain. So I get him on a flat table. I'm in the fetal position, and we do a quick neurological survey. He's fine. Bowel and bladder function's fine. He's just got a really hot back. I found out that he was a trucker, and he was in Oregon, and he was working on his truck or his engine, and he slipped and he grabbed the rail and he smacked his back, and it hurt a little bit, but then he got in his truck and he drove all the way to Chicago. Couldn't get out of the truck. So his buddy calls, bring him on in. So it's about 3:30 in the afternoon on Friday, beautiful spring day. Now my patients are starting to roll in from the after work evening group of patients that I see. And I have one of my 3 rooms tied up with this gentleman laying in the fetal position. And I would put ice on his back, and we'd come back 10 minutes later and try to move him. And he was screaming in pain at the top of his lungs. I couldn't get this guy up off the table to move. So I waited we do ice him down a little bit more and try to get him in a comfortable position. And now my patients are rolling in, and half an hour goes by, 40 minutes go by, and I still can't get this guy off the table. Every time I try, he's screaming. Now his buddy that brought him in is getting ticked off with me. He's like, do something. I'm like, what do you want me to do? The guy can't move. He can't get off the table. And he said, take an x-ray or something. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna drag this guy off the table, throw him on a cold x-ray table and position him for an oblique view of the lumbar spine. Forget it. He needs to be in an acute care setting. And I told him that. I said, look, there's nothing else I can do for it. So let's, we'll call the paramedics, and we'll get him to an acute care facility. They'll give him some medicine. He'll feel better. He'll be all right. So I make the call. And local paramedics and fire truck come. But unfortunately, the parking lot of the building that I was in had height limitations for any trucks coming into the parking lot, because there was this very nice copper overhang on the building that trucks kept banging into when they came into the parking lot. So the owner of the building put this gate up, the steel gate, that limited the height of vehicles that come in. Well, unfortunately, the paramedics that came in, the height was just perfect to carve off the light cherries, and onto the main road, which shut down one lane on a very busy road in Chicago during rush hour. So now there's an accident at work. The paramedic, he can't see anybody. He has to go for an alcohol and drug screen because he was involved in a wreck while on duty. So they had to call another district paramedics and fire trucks. So now I've got one of the lanes is taped off. Police are directing traffic. There's a fire truck. There's a ambulance with their cherries knocked off, and another paramedic coming, and another fire truck, and 20 people starting to accumulate in the parking lot to watch this debacle roll out right in front of my office. And I remember my patients coming in. I was look at them in the waiting room, and they just had this ghostly look on their face, like, I can reschedule, doc. I said, it's okay. So it's never good having somebody wheeled out of your chiropractic office on a stretcher from the paramedics, but with 20 people watching and 2 paramedics and 2 fire trucks. And I recall the paramedic coming in and I said, listen, this guy's got a hot back. He looks at me, goes, is he paralyzed? I'm like, shut up. The guy's got a acute back. Just come get this guy out of here so I can get on with today. It was a spectacle that's a case that I won't forget.
How did it end? What happened to the gentleman?
He ended up in the ER in pain management, and they, I guess they gave him some morphine and calmed him down, and he had an acute back episode. Back pain can happen like that, where it can take you to your knees, and it can be very severe. People think they're dying, when in essence it's a severe sprain or a ton of inflammation in the back that'll just lock you up. But generally speaking, that you recover fairly quickly with a little bit of medicine and conservative care, but not in this case. He ended up at my place and not the ER first. So that was a funny story.
As a personal injury attorney, I work with medical records on a daily basis, and I must say handwritten medical records are a nightmare to work with. I cannot search them, they slow me down, and half the time I can't read them easily. Do you know why some doctors insist on keeping it this way?
Not really. I mean, I've been adopted technology, and you always try to be more efficient in what you do. In patient care is no different.
So what do you use in your practice?
I started using speech recognition technology as an early adopter in, I would say, 16 years ago with the Dragon products, Naturally Speaking Professional version 3. It sucked. It was awful. But I stuck with it, and now I think it's on version 18 or something like that. And the language model, your voice files get big, so you can develop macros and so on and so forth and drag and drop. But you still have to spend the time with the microphone and dictating. But nowadays, they have the Ambient Scribes, which are, in my opinion, an absolute game changer, not only for documentation purposes, but contextually for inferring potential treatment options or recommendations that might be of benefit to the patient using AI large language models. Why people use handwritten rights? I think some of the electronic records that came out initially during Obamacare, you had incentives financially to buy into making all your office medical records electronic. And so you had all these software vendors out there selling 6-figure software packages to clinics, and you had financial incentives for the government to do so. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I was one of the early adopters, and it was horrible because you had to have the hardware, the redundant drives, the hot swappable drives, the servers, which make a lot of noise, take a lot of energy. And then the software wasn't developed by doctors. It was developed by IT guys. So there was a lot of click boxing. And then all of a sudden now you're taking the doctor-patient relationship into the doctor-computer relationship. And the doctor's not even looking at you while he's talking to you. He's looking at a computer screen and clicking check boxes and so on and so forth. And then there were ways, the early adopters of the EMRs, there were ways that you could copy one note to the next, one note to the next, one note to the next, so it all looks the same. And I can say for some of the software that I've come across, at least in the chiropractic profession, is you may get an 8-page report from an initial visit, but it's absolute gobbledygook and worthless because none of it really has a flow to it, or you can gain. You'd be searching forever to try to find out what's really going on with this patient. You may have a lot of data that's just sort of thrown together in a big pot of soup, but there's no real deep interpretation or differential considerations or treatment plans that you can carve out from that. So I'm not sure why anybody would want to be writing notes, handwritten notes for anything nowadays, especially with the technology that's available with the Ambient Scribes.
How has using Ambient Scribes changed the way you interact with patients?
Okay, I could go on for quite some time on that, but I will say, besides the patient, I'll get personally 700 plus hours of my life back per year by using this technology. As long as there's consent from the patient and the software is HIPAA compliant, which they all are, and they're becoming more and more popular now. it allows me to fully engage with my patient. I'm not sitting in front of a computer clicking checkboxes or scribbling notes down that I can barely read myself that I have to, dictate at the end of the workday. It'll actually capture all clinical information. Is it 100%? No, but contextually, it's pretty good. And from what I've learned and what I've seen so far, using it for about a couple of months now, it makes inferences about potentially you may want to consider this or consider this type of part of the plan for the patient, which is interesting because that wasn't discussed in the doctor-patient encounter. But based on that conversation and the language models they use, it makes inferences that you may want to consider this as part of the plan. Example, consider physical therapy for back if it continues to hurt. Well, I'm the chiropractor treating the patient, but from that conversation, it pulls out, consider physical therapy if symptoms persist. So if it can make inferences based on that, what other inferences can be used if you're using a large language medical model as to treating the patient to promote health and fitness, or maybe there's something else that can be utilized that we don't know about that other groups might know about in the language models that might be thrown into the mix for consideration. So I believe the Ambient Scribes at the end of the day, to be honest, it's the most enjoyable cutting and pasting I've ever done in my life because you make minimal edits to the output and then you can put that directly into the medical record. There are some Ambient Scribe technologies now that work with the medical record, so it just dumps right into the record while you're doing it. Mine, not so much, so I have to review the scribe at the end of the day and then make minimal edits and then just cut and paste it into the medical record and done. So it's a much more enjoyable experience. And now I'm getting home at the end of the workday and going, wait, I don't have to dictate for an hour and a half. What should I do? The driving range is right down the street. Maybe I'll work on my short game for an hour or so. So there are a few times in life that I've been really wowed by technology and say, wow, that's a really cool piece of technology that has utility. Speech recognition technology was one of those moments. This is another one, the Ambient Scribe technology, without a doubt.
How do you explain the use of Ambient Scribes to your potential patients?
I just tell them, look, I do things differently now, and I want to be fully engaged with you during the examination, and I'm going to be talking my way when it comes to the examination part. So don't mind that. I'll just be talking about my findings as we move forward. This application is just going to collect all of the clinical data. And the other thing too is my Polish isn't that good. I understand most, if not all, of what my patients are telling me because there's only so many stories you can tell about the neck and the shoulder and the back in Polish. I've heard it all, believe me. So I understand what the stories are. I just can't have that fluent conversation in return. So I will prompt my Ambient Scribe to translate all of the Polish into English. And it's contextually very good. So now I'm not missing anything that I might have missed subtly. At the end of the day, I have to take all my notes that I handwritten. I have to read it. Well, obviously I'm going to forget some things if it's a real busy day. Not with the scribe. It captures all the clinical data. So in my opinion, the medical record is more accurate and precise as to what really transpired in that encounter. So I just tell the patients, don't mind, I'll just put my phone here and we're just it's going to capture all the clinical information and let me talk my way through the exam. And people love it because now I'm fully 100% engaged with the patient and I'm not distracted writing things down or in front of a computer, clicking, checking boxes.
That is fascinating. I remember a conversation with my friend, my mentor, another great attorney. And when I told him that I'm looking to hire an assistant because I am overwhelmed with work, he took a sip of his coffee, looked at me and said, Greg, you don't have a human resources problem, you have a technology problem. And that was a big awakening moment for me. And when I implemented some of the tools he recommended, the practice changed dramatically in a good way.
Yeah, I think just time alone and more accuracy to the medical record, the note, that encounter. Yeah, I feel good leaving the office at the end of the day with very little to do administratively, which is great. And that's led me to have more time to do the actual research on the one-year cohort that I'm launching on May 1st. So now, not only that, I'm using the Ambient Scribe technology to collect the data prospectively with this study, which, as you know, prospective data versus retrospective data has sharper teeth when it comes to value of the data research-wise. So we'll be collecting all of this information in real time, prospectively, as time moves forward, thanks to the ambient medical scribe technology.
In personal injury cases, insurance companies quite often push back on chiropractic care. Do you know why?
Probably overutilization. After 35 years of doing this, I know what to expect when I see a patient that has a disc problem in their back, or a cervical radiculopathy in the neck, or a rotator cuff tear, or a sports injury, a turned ankle, stuff like that. After you see enough of these patients, you get a general idea of what to expect and how long the response to care should be. Now, there are plus or minus a week or two here or there, but generally speaking, I can tell when the patient comes to see me based on their past medical history, their clinical findings, and their most recent findings that they should respond rapidly. It should take this long, and they should expect X amount percentage improvement over a period of time. If they don't, there has to be a reason why. And if that's where you have to, as a clinician, be very astute as to pick up to, what am I missing? Is there something missing? Because usual and customary should respond like this. Example, somebody gets hit from behind and they have an acceleration, deceleration, the typical whiplash type injury, hit from behind. Those typically respond within 4 to 6 weeks with this treatment, that treatment, this home care, barring any fracture, dislocation, and so on from plain film radiography. Those tend to get better. Sometimes there's some leftover minimal symptoms, but that's less common than normal. Versus a side impact collisions where people get hit from the driver's side or from the passenger side, where I've seen those are the most injurious types of collisions, where spine fracture comes in, compression fractures, or those were found with nuclear medicine inspect. The side impact collisions, those are different story. But generally speaking, the rear enders and those, most cases typically respond in a certain time. If it goes beyond that, there has to be some way to quantify or qualify continued treatment. But bottom line is, most cases that I see, I know exactly how they're going to respond. I know what to expect. I know the outcomes. And if it doesn't meet that criteria, then I'm digging deep to find out why.
What's the right balance between treating an injury and avoiding unnecessary care?
Being objective and doing a thorough evaluation. And that will, if a patient has full pain-free range of motion of the affected joint or joints, and their orthopedic tests are negative and neurologically they're intact, and their pain diagram shows that they've significantly improved, then that's it. You're at that point of maximum medical improvement.
Is there any number of chiropractic visits after which a person should raise an eyebrow and start asking additional questions?
When I talk to my patients about response to care, on every visit, I'm asking them percentage overall improvement. What's better? What's worse? Has anything changed? And with a mechanical problem of the spine, the response to care is fairly linear. You know what to expect. You can have a bad day. You can have an off day. Things can go south for a little bit, but they always come back. And it's at that point where you develop a relationship with the patient that they don't want to really be in your office forever. They want to get back to their normal homework and leisure activities as quickly as possible. And that's the goal.
Some of the chiropractic videos on TikTok get millions of views. Do you think they help or hurt the profession?
I've seen a wide array of different TikTok and YouTube videos on, I don't necessarily say it would be chiropractic, be manual medicine of some sort. I know there's some overseas YouTubers that do all kinds of neat things, and they film a rather provocatively dressed patient to do all of these manipulations of the pelvis, the hip, the shoulder, the elbow, the back, the neck, the ear, you name it, they're doing. There's others that use the Y strap and, aggressively pull on the head and adjust everything from the upper neck to the lower back. And it's quite sensational, I think. And as a matter of fact, I've had a few younger patients come in and say, "Hey, can you do that to me?" I'm like, No, I'm not. I wasn't. That was not part of the curriculum that I learned how to do any manual medicine. So, in essence, I think there's I think the younger generation is more attuned to the TikTok and the YouTube videos of the manual medicine. I think they're more receptive of it. I think the middle-aged to older generation people don't have probably don't even watch those things.
So do you get younger patients asking for TikTok treatment?
Yes, actually I do. I have a patient come in and show me the Y strap, where you put it around, you grab it, and it's like you're on a water ski and you just pull back and pull the whole head off, and not off, but can you do this? Can you do this? It seems like that would feel good. I'm like, no. So yeah, it's usually the younger patients that I see to come in.
Do you think that those TikTok chiropractors have patients' safety in mind?
Well, I think any doctor, chiropractor, or otherwise worth their salt always has patient safety in mind, for sure. Well, they should. But I believe, the sensationalism is a big part of it, maybe to draw them to their practice, or a certain subset of people to their practice that say, oh, that's cool, and I want to do that. But I can't see myself putting a Y strap around a 65-year-old cervical spine and having my way with it with axial decompression. I don't think that's patient selection in what you do matters. The way I would treat a 85-year-old patient with stenosis of the spine is a lot different than somebody that's 18 years old and is 800-meter track and field athlete.
I take you value patient safety more than TikTok views.
100%.
We touched on the subject of AI and ever-changing technology. Do you think AI will ever replace chiropractors?
Potentially. I mean, if you look at what's the MIT group that does those robots? From time to time, they'll show the videos of these robots physically walking upstairs and doing this, and it was real clunky. And then a couple years go by, and now they're doing somersaults and they're walking up ladders. And then now they're fencing with you. They're doing karate with you. So technology moves so fast. I can see where the potential is that a machine could potentially be developed that utilizes the latest technology like thermography or pressure sensitive sensors and maybe pistons, that you might be able to one day step into a machine and it would set your entire body up in such a way that it could correct malalignments or joint fixations via short amplitude, high velocity maneuvers of a piston of some sort, or be able to mold the spine. There are some techniques in chiropractic where you can straighten out a scoliotic spine in a certain prone position laying down. Of course, when they get up, it'll probably return to normal, but there are ways that you can straighten out a scoliotic spine passively with no gravity. So potentially there might be some applications through language models and sensors and advances in technology. You might be able to replace the manual medicine part of what chiropractors do. Maybe. It's an interesting question.
I know you're an early adopter of technology, but if there's a machine like that produced in the next few years that can do spinal manipulation, would you try it on your own back?
Why not? Why not? Actually, I'm looking at a device that I've been thinking about for many years. I just never really got to the point where I'm going to start welding this thing together. But there are ways that you can do traction in your back, for instance, inversion therapy. Those machines where you put your feet into and it will slide back and you're upside down for traction of the back. There are tables in my office that I use for passive lumbar traction manually. But there might be a device that you could use at home where you could actually sit on a chair where the seat part would lower and you would have a vibratory device in the low back that would slowly give you this vibratory sense while you're unloading your spine, which keeps coming back into my cerebral cortex that, hey, I need to develop that because I think that would feel really good in the back. There might be some application in the real world. So that's my more creative side.
Speaking of self-help and of what people try at home, Have you seen any crazy stuff that somebody tried to do to their own back to supposedly cure it?
Name it. I've had patients that have cousins, brothers, sisters, husbands, of course, walk on your back. There are all kinds of different massages out there you can get that some involve manipulation, inversion tables, self-traction tables. That's about the extent of it. There's also this admixture of patients that have the special nutrient or the special supplement or the special concoction or this European blend of who knows what that, this is it. And this is tremendous and it's helped me tremendously. And I take a look at it and I read the ingredients and go, I don't know what the hell this is. But a lot of that could be said for the supplement and nutrient industry too. There's who knows what you're getting over the counter on the shelf. And not too many people really look deeply into the background of where these supplements and products come from. But there's a lot of people on social media and TikTok and all social media platforms that, they have the answer and this is it and this is the supplement. And, there's, they have that pseudo multi-level marketing approach to it. So buyer beware. That's all I'm saying. You need to do your homework on that.
For all of the attorneys out there hunched over at their desks, what is one posture tip that you can offer?
Get a desk that raises up and lowers and spend half of the time on your feet and half of the time sitting.
And ideally get a little treadmill because these days you can be standing desk.
Right. I don't know so much about how you do work walking on a treadmill standing up. That's interesting. I don't have that kinesthetic experience to really know how that would work or feel, but it's interesting.
So standing desk, that is your number one recommendation.
Have a desk that can telescope up and down so you're not in a flexed, biased sitting position for most of the day.
When you are at a coffee shop, do you find yourself silently diagnosing people's postures?
Not just postures.
Just
Not just postures. I'm always looking for clinical subtle signs. What am I seeing? The face and the skin tell a lot about a person. Their posture, their gait, their station tells a lot about the person, how they walk. But generally speaking, I'm people watching all the time.
So what can you tell by a posture of somebody who's standing in front of you in a line at a coffee shop?
You can, I'm always looking for neurodegenerative disease like Parkinson's disease or where you're seeing the resting tremor and the shuffling gait and the forward flexed neck and craning cervical spine, the masked faces. You can always tell someone that has cystic fibrosis by the way they walk. That's straightforward. People that have hip pathology, their gait's totally different and changed. Osteoporosis, of course, you see all the elderly women that are hunched over with the big thoracic spine curve and the neck that's down, the head that's barely up. So I'm always looking for also neurological disease, hemiparesis or post-stroke, spastic paresis versus athetoid movements, more smooth movements. So I'm always trying to test my own clinical acumen by just visualizing the world around me.
That's interesting. You brought it up. I was just getting lunch a few days ago when we had our late winter snow, and there was this one street lamp that was broken. It was hanging down. As a personal injury attorney, I took a look at it and I was curious if it's going to happen to it.
Drops.
And if that drops, somebody's going to get hurt badly.
Yeah.
So you see those things.
Yep.
It comes with the job.
Absolutely.
Can you tell a person's character by the way they walk?
Yes, in some cases, yeah. But when people are upright, shoulders back and down, head up, that's a level of confidence. People are confident in the way they walk. Versus somebody that's usually walking around with their head down, they don't make eye contact, protracted shoulders, more either very introverted or usually people that are upright, standing, lock eyes with you. They have confidence about themselves and what they do.
How can you tell if a patient exaggerates his condition?
Well, during the consultation, I guess I can speak on the clinical side. There are some signs that you can use, like Waddell signs, to see if somebody is, exaggerating what they're doing. But there's also subtle things too that you can do clinically. For instance, if somebody's claiming back and leg pain and they're saying I have a big disc problem and it's a big problem, they're not going to be able to sit comfortably straight up if you have a disc problem. It hurts to sit, and it hurts to straighten out your leg. It hurts a lot. So I would, during the clinical exam, to differentiate between somebody who might be not telling the full truth is, I'm going to say, look, I'm just going to evaluate your foot and ankle. Right now, let me have a look at your foot and ankle. And so I take the foot and ankle and I'll completely straighten out the leg. And while I'm looking at the ankle, they're, oh no, that doesn't hurt. But in essence, I'm doing a straight leg raise. You have a disc problem in the back. You're not going to be able to sit up straight and straighten out your leg. So little signs like that. And coming back to the story, I've heard the story of true radiculopathy, two true disc problems, true sprain strains of the neck, acceleration, deceleration, whiplash type injuries. I've seen enough of them to know what the presentation is. And during the consultation, if that story of the symptom profile changes, and some of the tests that I run are everything hurts. That's another one. Everything hurts. This hurts, that hurts, this range, that range, lift the shoulder, everything hurts. Or I get a pain diagram, and you're supposed to delineate the areas of your body that hurts and what type of symptoms you're having. If I get both shoulders, the neck, the mid back, the low back, the hips, and the right leg, something's a little off there. You can't be specific about the nature of the pain based on everything hurting. So that's a sign that, hey, approach with caution and try to be as objective as you can.
If spines could talk, what would they be screaming about today's habits?
Two things: posture and vitamin D. What do we do all day long in the office? We're in what I would call a flexion biased position. You're in front of the computer, your head is down, your hands are out, your shoulders are forward, your upper back is bent a little bit more than usual. And when you're not at the office on the computer or you're on the subway home, you're on the phone. With your neck flexed, shoulders forward, upper back flexed. So the spine, in my opinion, is screaming, do the opposite. You're flexed all day long. How about spending some time through extension? And you can get a physical therapy roll off of eBay, 3 feet by 6 inches, hard foam roll, and everyone, barring any condition, spinal condition that says they can't do this, should be on an extension program every day. Get your spine extended in the opposite direction, because we spend an inordinate amount of time during the day and the evenings and flexed. The other would be vitamin D deficiency. Generalized bone pain, spine pain, leg pain, joint pain. We live in Illinois here, where we don't get a lot of sunshine through the winter months. It's pretty dreary. And vitamin D deficiency is very common. And a lot of it's overlooked because you don't historically get your vitamin D tested when you see your family physician for a routine physical and blood work. It covers a lipid panel, CBC, a metabolic panel, and maybe a couple of thyroid tests, and that's about it. More focus on cholesterol and blood sugar than there is vitamin D, but vitamin D is not just vitamin, it's a prohormone. It's involved in over 5,000 different physiological reactions and cannot, in my opinion, clinically be overlooked. Make sure that your vitamin D levels are where they should be optimally, around 60 nanograms per milliliter. Where the cutoff line is around 30, should be around 60 nanograms per milliliter. And that will bode well for not just the immediate levels of discomfort you have, but for your overall physiological health.
I have a standing desk and I absolutely love it. But I'm curious, have you seen anything else out there that will allow you to maintain extension posture throughout the day? Something that would not require that you look down or look straight ahead at your monitor?
I've seen one interesting application lately for dental hygienists and for dentists, believe it or not. There is a device out there now, because I see dentists and hygienists that have chronic neck and headache problems because they are in a static position of flexion while they're inside somebody's mouth. And it's usually the same side. They don't change to the other side. It's the same side. And they do this for their entire careers, ultimately leading into significant cervical degeneration, headaches, and so on and so forth. So my advice to these is make sure, to the dental field, make sure you have full, active, pain-free range of motion of your cervical spine, and do not opt out of optimizing your posture to give your cervical spine a break. one of the dental hygienists told me recently that there is a device now out there where you don't have to bend the neck and look into the mouth. There is a headset that you can put on and you can look straight up and it will look into the mouth for you while you're doing your work. So you have this upright posture rather than a flexed and rotated posture. Not cheap, but in my opinion, worth every penny. Other applications would be some of the gaming things that you see out there now, these, which I think are really cool, particularly the driving games. But there are devices that are out there now. They're not cheap, but they will allow you to put you back in a more of a recumbent position on your back where the monitor is above you and your hands are positioned in such a way that you can do things with equal distribution of gravity across your entire body rather than sitting up in a flexed position. Now, that fantastic application, in my opinion, as it relates to repetitive stress disorders and flexion disorders.
You brought up a good topic, a price point. People think, well, this is expensive. I will get myself some old desk or old chair that doesn't fit me right, but so be it, it's cheap. And I think they underestimate the amount of money they're going to have to spend down the road to fix it.
Right. Take care of your body, take care of your posture. Be wary about, make sure that you have full, active, pain-free range of motion of your neck and shoulders and back and hips and so on. Those are important points to make for longevity because ultimately nobody lives forever, but you want to be able to function all the way up into the days when it's time to go. You want full function because then you can be active. You lose your function, you lose your activity, and you're more susceptible to injury.
I've heard this saying recently that before the age of 30, we do everything we can to damage our health. And after the 30, we do everything we can to preserve it.
We try. Some not.
If someone has never been to a chiropractor, what would you like them to know before their first visit?
Do your homework. Investigate that doctor. It's not just chiropractor. It's any doctor that you go to see, any specialist. You want to do your homework. Do the background. The internet is out there and it has a lot of information on every doctor and physician and other people, friends and family. Talk to them and look at the Google business reviews, read them. And then if you feel comfortable enough to make the first appointment, you do not have to follow through with care if you don't like. You can go through the consultation, the evaluation, ask questions with the chiropractor that you're potentially going to see and have them come up with options for you. And there's not one size fits all. There can be different options available. And you don't have to agree to continue with care on that first visit. So the initial, in my opinion, I'm biased because I'm a chiropractor. I think everyone should have chiropractic care as part of their health plan. It's not unreasonable to see a chiropractor 4 to 6 times a year as part of your health plan. But I'm biased, of course. But go to that first visit, do your homework, go to that first visit and have the consultation and feel the doctor out. See if this is the right fit or not, if you feel comfortable with them. If the explanations that the chiropractor gives you are adequate enough to fully understand what it is going on. You need to know what's going on, what the treatment plan is, what do they recommend. If they're recommending treatment plans of 60 visits,
hell,
buyer beware. If you get a very good explanation of the differential considerations of what's driving your pain, and a reasonable explanation of how we're going to solve the problem utilizing chiropractic methods, then you have enough information at that point to make a informed decision. But you don't have to follow through with care. But the initial consult and evaluation, I think, is a worthwhile approach to see if there's a conservative methods of chiropractic care that could potentially be of benefit.
You brought up a great point. Before you can propose a plan of treatment, you have to know precisely what the problem is. What are we treating? So I would hope that as a patient, you have an answer to that question before you schedule your next appointment.
Absolutely, you need that. And differential considerations of, well, it's more likely than not this and this. But if you get you have the spinal subluxation and we're going to need to treat that and for quite some time, that doesn't give you a real clear answer as to what's driving your symptomatology and what can you expect when and how long and what's the treatment plan for and what are our goals. And the other thing too that sometimes is missing is that the doctors, not just chiropractors, other doctors, they need to know expectations. What do you want? What does the patient want? What are their goals? That's important. If the goals are to just maintain feeling good and set up a maintenance program of once per month, okay, as long as that's in the medical record and everybody's on board with it, fantastic. But if somebody has a real question as to what's driving their symptoms and they're concerned about it, then you need a full consultation, evaluation, and differential consideration, including or excluding diagnostics. But you need to drill it down to the top 3 differential considerations of what it could be. And then from there, that steers the treatment. Once you have a firm diagnosis, that will actually steer the appropriate treatment. And then you know, based on the diagnosis, what to expect on for outcomes of treatment.
I have a feeling that people these days often look for what's the best product, what is the best service, but they forget to add the second part, which I think is extremely important. What is the best product for me? What is the best chiropractor? What is the best doctor, attorney for me, for my situation? And I think you brought up a great point, how it has to be a good mutual fit. So once again, I would like to encourage people to make sure they find the doctor they feel comfortable with and that this is a good fit for them.
It brings on another interesting point too, that now that you mentioned that, there are some patients that I can't help, and I tell them that. Example, I'll have some patients that will come in for their first visit, and I come highly recommended and referred. So they come in, and while I'm doing the history, I found out they have some, odd symptom profile that's never really responded to any care. And I also find out that they've seen 3 other chiropractors and a couple of massage therapists and another specialty doctor with no degree but has some manual medicine skills. And that treatment has been rather extensive, 30, 40 treatments. And now they're in my office because I come highly recommended that I'm going to apply some more manual methods that are going to help them when all of that other treatment has not. And that's where I sometimes get into an issue to say, look, you've already had 30 some treatments. Why are you in my office thinking I'm going to do the same treatment but expecting a different result? We need to dig down a little bit different. We need to do a little bit more investigation. Unfortunately or fortunately, sometimes these people walk out of my office not in a very good mood because I didn't treat them the way that they thought they needed to be treated. That happens too sometimes.
I guess what I say to my potential clients sometimes, I would rather disappoint you now, today, by not taking this case than disappointing you a year later or 2 years down the road.
That's an excellent point and rather poignant, I would say. Yes, it's a good way to put it.
If there was one change you would like to see in how people approach chiropractic care, what would that be?
Do your homework, give it a chance. Go for that initial visit. Go for the consultation. Go for the evaluation and see what the skill set and background is of that chiropractor that you're seeing, because it can be of great benefit when used in the appropriate clinical setting. And myself being biased, I think everybody can benefit from chiropractic care, but you have to find the right fit. And bottom line is outcomes. You have to respond appropriately to care. And as I've seen historically with mechanical conditions of the spine or extremities, they respond in an appropriate manner relatively quickly. That's what you really want. You want a good consultation. You want a good evaluation. You want differential considerations and a solid treatment plan to get to your goals as quickly as possible. And at that point on, it's up to you how you want to manage your healthcare. But like I said, it's not unreasonable to seek chiropractic care 4 to 6 times a year once you're done through your initial treatment plan.
That was a great conversation. Thank you, Doctor, for sharing your insights.
Thanks for having me, Greg. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episode. Thanks again, and I will see you in the next one.